Since the dawn of civilization, the Egyptians embarked on a journey to the afterlife, meticulously preparing their tombs to ensure a safe passage to eternity. But behind the grandeur of their works lies a dark warning.
Who dares disturb the eternal rest of the pharaohs risks incurring the wrath of the gods and the curse of those who guard their tombs.
Stories of mysterious premature deaths, relentless misfortune, and inexplicable events have surrounded the discoveries of brave archaeologists who dared to challenge the ancient prophecies. From the legends of Tutankhamun to the tomb of Ramses the Great, the curse has manifested in terrible and unexpected ways, defying human rationality and leaving behind an aura of terror and superstition. But what truly lies behind this millennia-old curse? Is it merely a matter of coincidence? Or is there something more sinister lurking among the shadows of the pyramids? A recently published study by researcher Pharaohs investigates the origins of this terrifying legend, and with concrete data and facts, charts a new research path that opens up incredible possibilities, capable of challenging everything we thought we knew about this ancient and mysterious people. But before delving into this fascinating study, if you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe to our channel to support our work and not miss our new videos. In 1922, after years of searching, British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, the pharaoh who lived during the 18th dynasty and died at the age of just 19. Tutankhamun's reign was very brief. His life was cut short at a young age by a mysterious illness. But he became one of the most well-known pharaohs of ancient Egypt thanks to the discovery of his tomb, which had remained intact for millennia, and a terrible legend that prophesied that all those who violated the pharaoh's remains would be struck by a dreadful curse that would lead them to death in a short time. And this indeed occurred a few weeks after the discovery, when Lord Carnarvon, the financier of Carter's expedition, died from an unspecified illness that manifested with symptoms of blood poisoning and pneumonia. But this was only the first of a series of mysterious deaths that would affect researchers, tomb robbers, and simple workers who had worked on the archaeological site. Is there, therefore, a connection between these enigmatic deaths and the curse that the ancient Egyptians prophesied for anyone who violated these sacred places? According to researcher Pharaohs, yes, and the cause would be attributed to radiation poisoning that affected all those who participated in the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. But not only this, many men and women would have paid with their lives for their thirst for knowledge. For example, Carter himself, years after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, would die from a very aggressive lymphoma. Clearly, Pharaoh's theory is undoubtedly extraordinary, but as we will see later, it is not just the result of mere suggestion, but is supported by concrete facts and data, which we are sure will capture your attention and leave you intrigued.
Those who break into this tomb will meet death from a disease that no doctor can diagnose.
A study conducted between 1999 and 2005 showed that the incidence of hematopoietic cancers, those primarily caused by radiation exposure, is higher in Egypt compared to any other country with similar environmental conditions. This incidence has been vaguely attributed to modern lifestyle factors, such as diet and industrial pollutants. However, this view has been firmly refuted by evidence from ancient Egypt. Numerous forensic studies confirm an unexpectedly high incidence of hematopoietic cancers, even in ancient Egypt. Analysis of skeletons from various locations and periods has revealed instances of multiple osteolytic lesions from myeloma, degenerative joint diseases, cranial porosity, and nasopharyngeal carcinoma at much higher rates compared to modern populations. According to several researchers, this firmly disproves the notion that such cancers can only be considered modern diseases. An additional study examined the causes of death of around 500 Egyptologists who worked on archaeological sites between the 1800s and the 2000s. Analysis of this data reveals numerous premature and sudden deaths, including several notable victims. In addition to the previously mentioned Carter and Carnarvon, we find Jean-François Champollion, famous for his translation of hieroglyphs, who spent many years studying texts inside the Saqqara pyramids, until he died in 1932 at the age of 41 from exhaustion and apoplexy, along with 5 of his colleagues. Auguste Mariette, a pioneer of the Saqqara excavations, suffered from various illnesses and near blindness before collapsing from a violent hemorrhage and dying at 59. The eminent British Egyptologist Walter Bryan Emery spent many years excavating for artifacts until he collapsed inside a tomb at Saqqara and died within hours. American archaeologist George Reisner spent years excavating the mastabas of Giza until, at the age of 75, he collapsed inside the Great Pyramid and died of suspected poisoning. Among the suspicious deaths, we also find one of the most well-known historical figures, Napoleon Bonaparte. It might be merely a suggestion or historical curiosity, but Napoleon Bonaparte did indeed lead a military and scientific expedition to Egypt, during which he explored the ancient ruins and, according to some accounts, even stayed overnight inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. Napoleon died at the age of 51 after suffering for months from illness, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and blood clots, which the post-mortem autopsy attributed to stomach cancer. Again, Napoleon's case might just be a suggestion, but the data from this study highlights that of the 505 cases analyzed of researchers who actively worked in some sites of ancient Egypt, 119 died from sudden and not fully explained illnesses. Furthermore, the exact cause of death, especially in older cases, was often not reported or was linked to vague symptoms rather than precise forensic examination. Additionally, certain types of tumors were not known in ancient times. For example, leukemia was defined only in the mid-1800s and lymphoma only at the end of the 1800s. So, what do these data show? Did the researchers who contributed to discoveries in ancient Egypt fall victim to some undefined radiation poisoning? Or are these just simple coincidences? To better understand the issue raised by Pharaohs, we must take a step back and analyze some specific characteristics of ancient Egyptian civilization. In ancient Egypt, death was not merely an end, but a transition to another existence, a divine realm where the pharaoh, like Osiris, the solar god, joined the gods. The mastaba, the monumental tomb in the shape of a truncated pyramid, was the sacred place where this miraculous event occurred. According to legend, Osiris, after being killed by his brother Seth, was resurrected through the intervention of his wife Isis and his son Horus. His body was prepared with magical rites and placed inside a stone sarcophagus. Transformed into incandescent light, Osiris ascended to the sky, reuniting with the father god Ra. This is a religious and humanized interpretation of an ancient rite that essentially reinterprets something that perhaps the ancient Egyptians did not fully understand. The body of Osiris, during the preparation for the rite, was nourished with supposed cakes and beer, and then placed inside a stone chamber where it magically transformed into incandescent light and ascended to the sky to join the Father God. The ancient Egyptians of the Old Kingdom believed that this process was literally and physically real, accomplished through alchemy or magic, and could not be understood by the common man. After the disruption of the First Intermediate Period, common Egyptians inherited the funerary literature of the Old Kingdom, which was said to contain great secrets. Ancient texts warned against revealing these mysteries.
Do not show it to anyone else. It is a true mystery that no man knows anywhere.
The Book of the Dead also distinguished between the kings of the Old Kingdom and ordinary humanity, which was characterized as common people. The means that allowed for this transformation and ascent to the sky was the invisible efflux contained in magical offerings. Osiris, for example, declares in the coffin texts,
I have power through offerings. I proceed through the efflux, through magic. Take the efflux so you will not be inert. Proceed from the blazing fire. I have consumed the magic of the spirits of magical food. The souls are in me. The shadows are in me. I am transformed into powerful spirits. I shine in the sun from the efflux. I am the Ancient One. My soul possesses power in its primordial form.
In Egyptian funerary texts, these offerings were called chefao, a magical food that played a crucial role in the resurrection process of the pharaoh. Described as cakes and beer or bread and milk, This food was not just a ritual offering, but a key element for the transformation of the sovereign's body. Among the magical foods, saffron cakes held particular importance. Symbolizing the eye of Horus, the sky god, these cakes were offered to Osiris to nourish his soul and prepare it for its journey to eternity. In the coffin texts, a series of spells detail the preparation and consumption of this magical food. The efflux, an energetic substance derived from the food, was associated with the movement of the sun and was administered in specific portions. But what was this magical food that had the potential to transcend the soul of the pharaoh up to the heavens? Surprisingly, some researchers have found a curious analogy between the description of chafao in the Egyptian texts and modern nuclear technology processes. Yellow cake, the raw uranium-235 ore, the primary nuclear fuel, actually shares characteristics with the magical food described in ancient texts. Raw yellow cake, however, is not sufficient to cause a nuclear reaction and must be enriched to a higher concentration. This process transforms the substance into a milky liquid. This milky appearance seems to be cryptically described in the coffin texts, where the processing appears to evoke the purification of the magical food and its preparation for consumption by Osiris.
Osiris received the milky fluid from the breast of Isis. He received the efflux from the cold drink, the efflux of decomposition. The cold drink is yours, the efflux is yours, the powers are in it.
The pharaoh's body, nourished with these specific elements, would then trigger a reaction that would produce a violent light and extreme heat. Physical evidence found inside the Great Pyramid surprisingly seems to support this incredible theory. The internal walls of the king's chamber were initially reported as polished marble because they reflected the light from the explorers' torches. But it was later understood that they were actually vitrified granite due to an extreme heat source. The stone sarcophagus is made of ordinary gray granite, but its surface has an unnatural dark brown color, as if it had been baked by intense heat, and the edges show signs of melting. According to some scholars, this heat might have been generated by a nuclear reaction triggered by the chafao. This uranium-based technology would also have produced radioactive waste that would need to be managed through burial, for which there is textual and physical evidence of its existence. For example, in Egyptian legend, it is said that upon Osiris's death, pieces of his body were enclosed in a lead-lined coffin and buried deep underwater. This description is consistent with the structure of the so-called Osiris tomb at Giza, adjacent to the pyramids, which consists of a vertical shaft 98 feet deep filled with water, at the bottom of which was a sarcophagus of dacite weighing about 44,000 pounds. The basalt coffins on the second level, at about 66 feet deep, were examined with a Geiger counter and found to be intensely radioactive, especially inside. Also at Giza, specifically in the basement storerooms in the Valley of Chephren and the second level of the Osiris tomb shaft we just mentioned, unusually high levels of radiation have been detected. Meanwhile, in various underground tombs at Saqqara, a gas called radon, emitted during uranium decay phases, has been identified. These levels of radiation, considered higher than normal background radiation, suggest that these sites could have been used for the storage of radioactive waste and call for further analysis of the area. This thesis also appears to be supported by the Book of the Dead, which clearly states that Osiris's body, or rather what remained of it, should be considered waste material and warns humanity to stay away from these remains as they would contain harmful spirits. Fellows' research is astonishing, but does not stop here. It seeks further evidence and analyzes the mastabas, the monumental tombs used during the early phases of Egyptian civilization. The mastaba tombs of ancient Egypt are an intricate enigma and apparently have nothing of what we might expect from a burial. No mummies, no skeletons, no elaborate funerary goods. Initially, they were just simple pits in the ground. Over time, they evolved into actual monuments, elevated rectangular structures with 2 internal rooms and a deep shaft leading to an underground burial chamber. But the strangest thing is that these mastabas were all identical. No matter how important the deceased was, their tomb always had the same exact appearance. And there were no decorations either, at least at first. Only simple, unadorned stones. Archaeologists have found everything in the mastabas. Statues, everyday objects, even votive offerings. But not a trace of a mummy, skeleton, or bone. Where have the bodies gone? The etymology of the term mastaba might provide further clues. In Arabic, mastaba means bench or banquet, a term derived from early European archaeologists who used names from local workers. However, the shape and function of these structures do not resemble a bench at all, which led researchers to investigate further. They discovered that mastaba might derive from the ancient Persian word benk, meaning bunker or vault. This term better fits these structures, which appear to feature underground spaces and hidden chambers. Moreover, bent refers not to a bench in the sense of seating, but to a secure place for storing something valuable or dangerous. The primary and original function of Egyptian mastabas was to store large quantities of offerings in ceramic vessels for a very long period. Over time, the belief developed that these offerings, such as beer or wine, were intended for religious rituals to appease the gods or assist the deceased in their passage to the afterlife. This interpretation, however, was influenced by later religious practices and Euro-Christian Egyptologists, who mistakenly interpreted depictions of processions as funerary ceremonies. In reality, the original offerings were not beverages and were not ceremonially presented on an altar, but were simply accumulated in underground chambers. An emblematic case is the mastaba that once stood at Saqqara and was later extended into a much larger, multi-layered structure known today as the Step Pyramid of Djoser. During the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, thousands of jars were transferred from Abydos to Saqqara to a new repository located beneath the Step Pyramid. This relocation was not a ceremonial act, but rather a large-scale operation termed refurbishment. In simple terms, it was as if the site at Abydos, where these mysterious jars were once kept, had deteriorated over the centuries and needed to be replaced. This led to the relocation of around 40,000 jars, which were placed in deep tunnels carved beneath the Step Pyramid of Djoser. This operation is described in the Famine Stele, which recounts how Pharaoh Djoser saved the country from a terrible famine worsened by a plague that was bringing the people to death. But what caused this plague? Is there a correlation with the Abydos site where the mysterious jars were kept? The jars of Djoser also contain another mystery, which we discussed in a previous video available on the channel. But briefly, we can say that among other peculiarities, these jars appear as mysterious objects because they were made from a very hard stone, diorite, which could not have been worked with the technology available to the ancient Egyptians at that time. In the previous video, we emphasized how unusual it was for the ancient Egyptians to use such a complex material in making these simple jars, whose apparent purpose was to hold food and provisions. However, the study we are analyzing might provide a more realistic answer. The jars did not contain food, but were much more likely to have contained some kind of sludge or mortar. This sludge might have been radioactive waste caused by the use of uranium during the ascent rituals to the heavens. Was the presence of this radioactive sludge that escaped from the Abydos site responsible for the mysterious epidemic during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser? And was this the real reason why these jars were made from a hard, difficult-to-work material like diorite? To answer these questions, Pharaohs' research suggests revisiting the interpretation of some ancient symbols found on the labels of the Abydos jars. But before exploring this symbolism, it is necessary to make a preliminary note. Modern physics distinguishes between two types of radiation: alpha and beta particles, and electromagnetic waves like gamma rays. Alpha particles are relatively large, slow, and not very penetrating. Beta particles are very small, highly active, and moderately penetrating. Gamma rays, on the other hand, travel only in straight lines, are highly penetrating, and very harmful to bone marrow, with exposure leading to hematopoietic cancers. The ancient Egyptian system featured two types of souls or spirits that emerged from the remains of Osiris's dead body: the Ba and the Ka. The Ba was initially represented as the abstract symbol of a bird. The labels on the Abydos jars distinguish two types of birds: which curiously resemble the modern designation of alpha and beta particle radiation. Following this logic, we can say that alpha radiation was represented as a large, slow goose. Beta radiation was represented as a small, agile bird, often illustrated fleeing up the vertical shaft of the mastaba. The Ka, which we might associate with gamma rays and was considered much more powerful and dangerous, was initially represented as the head of a serpent and later as upright human arms and hands. As we know, radioactive waste is very dangerous because it lasts for long periods, such as technetium with a decay time of 211,000 years, or cesium with 2.3 million years. It is again curious to note that the drawings on the Egyptian mastabas depict large numbers of specific birds: 111,200 doves, 11,110 generic birds, 120,000 ducks or geese. These large numbers of birds suggest the existence of a code indicating the expected lifespan of all the waste stored in the mastaba shafts. Another interesting fact is that in the mastaba, the burial chamber was offset from the shaft, as if to limit the escape of gamma rays, which, as we have seen, travel only in straight lines. The murals of the mastaba also depicted smaller BA birds fleeing up the vertical shaft. In the elevated cover, the internal chamber was positioned directly above the underground burial chamber, the shortest distance to detect possible gamma ray leaks. This chamber contained a K symbol, indicating it was for the Ka. The chamber was also ventilated by small holes placed high up and was used to house live birds that acted as canaries in the mines to detect possible K leaks. Numerous texts refer to the continuous delivery of live birds to the mastaba, probably sacred ibises. For example, the historian Josephus Flavius recorded that the ancient Egyptians used caged ibises to detect evil serpents. Birds, as we know, are known to be extremely sensitive to radiation. Following all these clues, we can hypothesize that the mastaba was designed to safely store and manage radioactive waste for millions of years. Its structure and operation, indeed, appear to be the result of profound knowledge of radioactivity and its dangers. The deep burial chamber was carved about 98 feet into the rock to create a physical barrier against radiation leakage, particularly gamma rays. Radioactive waste was contained in very hard and dense stone jars, similar to sarcophagi, most likely to prevent the escape of penetrating radiation. The contents of the jars were semi-solid sludge, mortar, or plaster. This strategy aimed to physically immobilize the radiation source, preventing the formation of hotspots or the leakage of radioactive liquids. The second outer chamber contained a sort of shelf used for presenting food offerings. This was a second ingenious strategy for detecting the presence of sterilizing gamma radiation. If the food placed on the shelf did not decompose normally, it was a clear sign of dangerous radiation. The tombs of the first and second dynasties at Abydos appear simpler, often consisting of shallow pits with little or no covering. As various pieces of evidence suggest, it was this lack of protection that might have led to radioactive leaks. Supporting this, several Egyptian texts mention Abydos as the site for the refinement and enrichment of magical efflux, suggesting that radioactive materials might have been manipulated at this location. Manetho's History of Egypt describes a severe plague during the reign of Jet, which might have been caused by exposure to radiation. At Abydos, hundreds of secondary tombs containing young individuals aged 20, 25 years, apparently in good health, have been found, who might have died from radiation poisoning. Finally, studies of skeletons from the Old Kingdom have shown a significant incidence of degenerative joint disorders and cranial porosity, conditions that can be caused by radiation exposure as well as by famine or plague. We began with the curse of Tutankhamun's tomb, and after a journey through time and the most mysterious places of ancient Egypt, we can say that behind what some authors romantically termed the curse of Tutankhamun, there seems to be something much more unsettling and mysterious, which undoubtedly raises countless questions. Pharaoh's research is highly intriguing. Those who wish to delve deeper will find a direct link to his work in the description of the video. It undoubtedly raises a series of questions that are not easy to answer, unless one questions everything we have previously thought we knew about the history of ancient Egypt. But now, having reached this point, we're really curious to hear your thoughts. Write in the comments what you think. If you enjoyed the video and want to support our work, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story.